We're online. Welcome, everybody. It's Brad from Boulders. Max, Hans Florine's joining us today. We're super psyched about this. Thank you, Hans, for taking time out of your life here, especially with so much in transition, but we'll let you tell all about that. I'm going to drop off here and be the man behind the curtain. And let you guys
Thank
talk,
you, Oz.
thanks again. And
cool. Thank you, Brad.
Great to be here. Thanks, Brad, for having me.
Welcome, guys. So we got Hans here. Just real quick, we are doing this. So this is our third Boulder sessions. Thanks for joining, guys. If you haven't seen the other ones, you can always check those out. But this is going to be a doozy. It's a good one here. We are raising money for the Access Fund, which I assume most of you are familiar with. But you can go to their website. We encourage you to please donate, become a member if you're not already. Also, if you're in Madison, Wisconsin right now, we have a food partnership with Tex Tubs, which is actually like 4 blocks from my house. I eat there a lot. It's delicious. So you guys should check out Tex Tubs. We have 10% discount too if you order tonight. Otherwise, let's get started here. So the man I'm about to introduce here holds the record for the number of ascents of El Capitan in Yosemite Valley. He 8-time, I believe, right? 8 different times you've had the record for the nose on El Cap. 3-time gold medalist at X Games for speed climbing, founder of the Do Hard Things Challenge, and in general, a man that just likes to move fast. What's up, Hans? How you doing?
I'm doing great, Max. Thanks.
I got you.
So I always like to kind of catch in on the things I think are super. Yeah. You guys are hearing me fine?
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
Yes, but there's a delay.
Yep, yeah, you're coming through. Yep.
I like to fill in on
maybe a small delay.
I like to fill in on bios, like what I think is important. And I think kind of the important things that are, I guess, missing are, I'm a dad. I have a 19-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old boy. He just turned 17 last Saturday. What do I do? Like, what does Hans do as a full-time climber? A lot of people think I'm a professional climber, but in this COVID-19, it's kind of up in the air what exactly I'm doing. But I used to manage a Diablo Rock gym, which is one of the Touchstone climbing gyms. I did that for almost 10 years. Just finished doing that last August. And I recently became an empty nester like a year and a half ago. So kind of wandering about as an adult again without kids. That's kind of what I'm doing now. Kind of the progression to get there was I was a military brat, born in Virginia, moved around to 4 or 5 different states and ended up in California. Went and got a college degree and 2 different business economics degrees and was a yuppie with a collared shirt and dress slacks for a few years. I joke like, I do motivational speaking and I'm kind of a handicap or a disabled motivational speaker because I don't have any missing eyes or ears or smell or limbs broken or whatever. And so, what do I have to say to people? I haven't really overcome anything, but oftentimes I brought business lessons to my climbing, and most motivational speakers do the reverse. They bring something from their sport to business. That's kind of my unique thing. And here I am. This book came out in 2016, and this is for those, there's got to be some people out there that don't know what that is, but it's El Capitan, right? It's 3,000-foot granite monolith. It's not the tallest cliff in the world, but it's the combination of the tallest cliff and most accessible, right? You can park your car 15 minutes from the base. This book, why I'm pointing at this book is not so much to sell you guys this book. I'd love if you felt all great about what Boulders Gym is doing, and I am, to give money to the Access Fund. But this route, the sun shadow line right up here up the rock, is the nose route. And it was first ascended in 1958. And most climbers that climb trad rock, outdoor, whatever, crack climbing, want to do the nose sometime in their life. Kind of like mountaineers want to do Everest, right? And I, like other climbers, had gone around and climbed 1, 2, 3 pitch routes and Joshua Tree, and sport climbing had just started in the 80s, and yet it was still like this feather in your cap, like you're not a true climber if you haven't gone and done, you know, climbing Joshua Tree, climbing Yosemite, and actually climbed a big wall on El Cap or Half Dome. So I wanted to do that. I didn't know how much work it was, but I went up and struggled up the Salathé and lost a bunch of weight, and I really didn't like it so much. I mean, it was hard work. It was vertical camping with a ton of work. And a lot of people may know that going in, and they think, hey, I'm going to climb the Everest of rock climbing one time and then I'm done. And I went to try climbing the nose in 1987 and failed, got 4 pitches up after a full day of work, and just rappelled back down and went back to college with my college roommate, Mike Lopez. We came back the next year and did it in just a little under 3 days. And I thought I was done with big wall climbing, but my good friend Steve Schneider said, hey, let's see if we can go faster. I kind of asked him, not knowing him that well, but he was kind of like this super celebrity of climbing. I said, hey, can we get the record on the nose? And he laughed at me because I'd only climbed it once, and he actually had climbed it by himself in a single day, which was amazing. He's the first and only person to have done that back then. And he showed me you could climb this giant rock in 8 hours, 8 hours and 5 minutes, actually, which was amazing. And I then just fell in love with covering a ton of terrain and going light and fast. And yeah, it's ridiculous that I've not climbed this 5 or 10 times, but 50 and 100, over 100 times now. I've climbed it 111 times. And this book marks the 100th ascent. And Jamie Moy, shout out to Jamie, she's an award-winning journalist. She made this book really readable. And she says this book answers the question, why would somebody climb this Everest of rock climbing more than once? That's what the book does. And I think pointedly, although hundreds like this nice, neat century decky system that the humans use, I got to climb with 85 or 80, somewhere around 85 different people to climb those 100 ascents. And that to me makes it super special, is that like it's not so much that I don't care, but I have just as much fun climbing with someone who's, quote, well below my ability as somebody above my ability. And this is like the most memorable route for many people who did it with me. It was the one and only time they did it. So I'm kind of like in their memory, or immortal in their minds, I guess, because they'll never forget me. Not because I'm, like super strong or anything. I got to be there with them on that climbing Everest, right? So super special for me that Falcon agreed to put out a book for it, and I get to share my story of that, really.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really beautiful point to bring up. Like that for some people, that's the one time they climb it, and that you're kind of forever immortalized, in that experience shared with them.
Yeah, and it could seem narcissistic, like I want to be immortal, but really I'm super selfish, and I get to be there when these people top out. They struggle for a day or 3 days or whatever it is to get it, and they're on top, and their eyes are just so big, and they're looking down 3,000 feet of granite, and they're just, they've pushed the envelope for themselves. They're so exhausted and so rewarded, looking down, so psyched they're on level ground after being in a harness for 3 days or 2 days or whatever it might have been on the ascent, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sick. Did you want to read a passage or anything from
oh yeah
from on the nose? That would be awesome.
So about the book is that I couldn't write the full story of all 100 ascents when this came out, but in the appendix I did a 1 or 2 line sentence about every single ascent. So anybody out there, maybe say, hey, I was one of those first 85 people. That'd be great if you plug that in on Instagram or wherever you're watching this on. Say, hey, Hans, and send me a direct message. I'd love to hear any of your reflections of climbing with me. But in the main text of this, I have some of the ones that are memorable, some that are speed climbing records, some are with famous people, some not famous people. This one is with Eric Weimer, and I've read this one a couple times because it's super memorable. If you don't know who Eric is, you soon will. and I'm going to start this mid-passage. It's April 1996. I went to the Phoenix bouldering contest for the 10th year in a row. You guys know I like competition, right? The oldest climbing competition in the United States, the event had begun to feel a bit like a family reunion. Shipoopi, which is Steve Schneider, was excited to introduce me to Eric, an up-and-coming climber he'd met a few days earlier while giving a slideshow presentation in Arizona. He's amazing, Shipoopi said, totally one of a kind. Eric Weimeyer was working on a boulder problem on the Piranha Wall when he approached at the Phoenix.
Cutting out a bit there. Might have lost him. I'm not sure if you guys can hear Hans right now, but it looks like he cut out a little bit. We'll just chill out here for 1 sec. See if he can pop back. I'll tell you guys stories as good as Hans is, but I don't have any right now. So it's going to be some difficult filler here. Let's take a look to see here if he's still, if you guys can still see him. Oh, we lost him. All right, well, we're going to get Hans back here in 1 sec and get right back to you guys. A couple technical difficulties, but we'll figure it out here. Be right back. Okay, 1 sec.
I am back, I think. You got me now? Max, do you guys have me again?
You're there. You're there.
Okay. I'm going to go again. Where did you guys leave off there?
You just started reading, actually. So,
Oh, no. Okay, April 1996?
We had just heard you were just meeting Eric, describing
Okay.
him. He was on the Piranha Wall. So,
Okay.
and then we lost your
So-
voice, and then we lost your everything else. But thanks for joining us back.
No problem. I don't know what happened, but technology, something.
Hey, no worries.
I approached Eric on the Piranha Wall, which is at the Phoenix Bouldering Comp. And at that competition, you are not allowed to give or take beta from other climbers. So in other words, you can't have a friend standing there coaching you on the route. Yet that's exactly what Eric was doing. Someone would yell, "Big reach with the right hand," said Eric's buddy, or "Farther, farther, that one." I watched as this tall, muscular climber latched onto the hold with a bloody hand and taped up finger. He moved a bit more slowly than most. His every move was guided by the voice of his friend. I looked around and no one else seemed concerned that they were breaking the rules.
Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. We're having some connection issues with Hans. It is, who is it? Louis C.K. who always is saying, it's an amazing world, We've got a guy in a parking lot in California. We've got two guys at home here in Madison, Wisconsin, and we're live streaming to the whole world. Thanks for all of you who are online here. Really appreciate it. We just keep losing Hans, but it's kind of an amazing time to be alive when you think about it, from the standpoint that we can actually do this. I mean, even just a year ago, this would have been a nightmare, and the fact that it's not working perfectly tonight is just testament to how far we've come in just a year, let alone just a few months. So hopefully he'll join us back. Really appreciate you showing up. And if not, that's it. So Max, what do you want to talk about?
Oh boy. I don't know. I think this is kind of all like a perfect, this is kind of a good summation of the difficulties that we're all going through in our lives at large. Everything's a little bit imperfect, but we're all just kind of flying by the seat of our pants right now. I think, kind of what you were just talking about, like the fact that any of this is happening, there is like a certain beauty and adaptability right now, which feels pretty good right now. My personal life right now, I was going for some nice walks around the neighborhood, and today was like the first real day that I noticed all the flowers blooming like on the trees and the lilacs, and it just smells so good outside, and it's real beautiful. Hans, you're back.
There you go, Max.
Yeah,
I found out what happened. I parked in the sun so there'd be good light on me, and of course, like it needed the phone. So I've now got the AC running on the back of my phone, and I'm in the shade. So
Awesome.
Made in the shade here.
Beautiful.
We were just talking about, that. Yeah, you're
all right, you guys. I am
just talking about
from my book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Keep
All right.
going. We got you.
I'll step out of here.
Thanks, Brad.
Where did we leave off?
Ooh, I don't know yet. When the phone started heating up, it was probably like a couple paragraphs in, I'd say.
All right. We're at the Phoenix bouldering contest. I'm watching this guy cheat. All of his friends are yelling beta at him, which you're not allowed to do, right? He moved really slow. Every move was guided by the voice of his friend. I looked around and no one else cared that he was breaking the rules. I began to notice that much of what the friend said seemed like super obvious, like cactus on your left, keep it tight. Then when it hit me, oh my God, Eric Weimeyer couldn't see. I turned to Shapoopy with a questioning look, and he said, yeah, man. He said, the dude's completely blind. Well, we watched Eric until he'd finished the climb, and then Shapoopy introduced us. I'm pretty sure my jaw was still on the ground. Eric grasped my hand and shook it enthusiastically, a huge grin on his face. He told me that he loved climbing and hoped to climb the 7 summits. He'd already done Denali, a 19-day effort, and the year prior, and Eric worked as a middle school teacher in Phoenix and was hoping to spend some time training in Yosemite over the summer break. I need to know your honest opinion, Eric asked me. Can a blind guy climb the nose of El Cap? Absolutely, I said. In retrospect, maybe I should have hesitated. The only adaptive climber I knew of was Mark Wellman, who was paralyzed from the waist down and climbed El Cap via a route known as the Shield in 1989. The endeavor took him 8 days. I'd never heard of a blind person who could climb, let alone one who attempted the nose of El Cap. But 2 months later, Eric showed up in Yosemite Valley with climbing partners Jeff Evans and Sam Bridgham and rented a house in Yosemite West. That summer, I spent a fair amount of time hanging out and climbing with them. I learned that Eric wasn't born blind, but his vision rapidly deteriorated due to a rare condition known as juvenile retinochrosis. I'm probably saying that wrong. By the time he entered high school, the disorder had completely robbed him of his sight. Eric said he was really angry and fought hard against leaving the sighted world behind, refusing to use a cane or learn Braille. So a month goes by, Eric trains, and we end up going up the nose route. And I'm going to skip forward. You'll have to buy the book to read that middle part. And I'm sending Eric out on lead, 1,000 feet off the ground. He's leading, not following us. And a lot of people who know multi-pitch climbing know like one person leads, and everyone's follows. So they like say, well, it was easy for Eric because he's not afraid of the exposure. He just clamps his jugs on the rope and ascends up, right? Well, actually, Eric led some pitches, which means he's up there 100 feet above the rest of us and like tying the ropes, and we're going to jug on this rope that a blind guy fixed, right? So pretty crazy. I mean, a couple times I set him out on lead and I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't give him enough pieces. And like, well, we gave him all the pieces we had. And it's just amazing how terrified you are for him. And you're feeling, you know, should I have sent him up there, right? Mm-hmm. So we spent 4 days on the nose, and my good friend Steve Schneider went around to the top with a camera crew to film the top. And I'm going to kind of jump to there and explain what happened as we topped out. Let's see. Where is this? Because this part kind of brings me to tears. Here we go. Okay. We sent Eric up for the last lead. We topped out after another full day of climbing for a total of 4 days of effort. It was the first and only ascent where I've ever lost track of the exact time. Eric had just become the first blind person to climb the nose. The seconds, minutes, and hours no longer mattered. At the top, Ellen and Eric embraced, that's his wife at the time, and the reporters surrounded him. I stood off to the side, watching and smiling. Chupupi, who had hiked up with the film crew as an assistant, came over and stood beside me. He spoke quietly in a rare moment of seriousness. You know, Steve, you know it's super rare. But he said, I know how hard that was for you because I can see it in you. At his words, my eyes welled up with tears. I had been so inspired by Eric's strength of character and commitment to face his fears that I hadn't realized how utterly fatigued I was. I sat down and let the tears fall, a product of physical and mental exhaustion and pride at having played a part in an incredible adventure that Eric had led us on. It wasn't me that led, it was Eric. So that's one of the stories of Eric. He went on to climb all 7 summits, the only blind person to climb all 7 summits. You know, one of the reasons I've climbed this route, this Everest of rock climbing, is that I've got to climb with the likes of Lynn Hill and Eric Weiermeyer and Steve Schneider and Yuji Hirayama and even that crazy guy who free soloed some. I forget his name. Alex something. Yeah.
Alex Handhold. Yep.
Handhold. Yeah. So by being this sort of niche weirdo that's climbed it 100 times, all these people from around the world, famous and unfamous climbers, have climbed the nose with me, and it's been an incredible thing to share, you know.
Yeah, that's such a journey. That's awesome, getting to share with like so many people and meeting new people. Have you done work with Paradox Sports adaptive climbing outfit?
I have. I mean, I've climbed the nose with people with other disabilities. And I've also, when I was managing the gym, we did Paradox Sports events where we climb a mile, or we did trainings so my staff could learn how to use all the adaptive equipment.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great work to do. I think, you know, providing access to everybody so everybody can climb is really sick. You had another book that recently came out, an audiobook, I think, speed climbing, right?
Yeah, I was supposed to get that ready. So over this winter, even before COVID hit, I'm trying to do some office stuff that I'm behind on. And I finally did an audio recording of my book from 2001, Speed Climbing, which was reprinted in 2004, I think. It's kind of amazing. You go to Amazon to buy Speed Climbing and it's like $170 or something crazy, right? Because everybody loves me, right? No, it's not because anybody loves me. It's because Falcon stopped printing them, right? And I get people trying to order the book on my site for $15, and I'm like, I don't have them. You know, you got to get them from Amazon for $200. So I finally revised it, kind of wrote it out and revised it to kind of modern standards this past couple months, and I recorded the audio of it. And I'm trying to get all the formatting right for you guys, so it's going to be really good. I read it as well as my friend Peter and my co-author Bill Wright. So got some different voices telling tales, and I don't know, just watch for me to launch that in the next couple of days.
Sick. That's exciting. How did when did you originally get into speed climbing? Like what kind of got you into? Did you start climbing just regularly and then just something kind of bit you and you're like, I gotta go fast?
Well, that goes back to the 80s, and we didn't have competitions in the mid 80s. We just climbed on natural rock. There were no gyms, but along came Snowbird and a couple other small comps, and they had, your difficulty climbing. They didn't have bouldering the first number of years, other than the Phoenix bouldering competition. All the artificial walls were sport climbing, and they not always, but sometimes had a speed event. And the first one I did, it was one of the low nationals. I won, and I won a blue water rope and a Petzl harness. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. I won something, And I was an athlete in track and field, a pole vaulter, and I always kind of, as a, I guess, competitor, I was familiar and safe in a competition environment where people told me what to do and told me the rules, and I'd learn the rules and I'd use them to my advantage, which was really easy in speed climbing. They're like, all holds are on, everything's on, and go as fast as you can and hit the timer, And even in difficulty, that really helped me to know what the rules were. Sometimes you could assume an arête was off, but I'm like, I don't want to assume, tell me. And then I'd find out a corner of an arête was on or not off route, and I would use it and make the problem much easier. And other people didn't bother to ask, and it would be harder for them, right? And so, but we're getting to this origins of speed climbing. It's like, I won something, and I was good at it. And the second one I went to, I tried really hard and I won, and I got, I don't know, $100 maybe or something. And when you're traveling around in a van and you just don't have any rent or anything, that's enough to keep you on the road for another couple weeks. So speed climbing was just a natural thing to do at the comps. And, to that kind of gesture of like, I was okay with competition, I think a lot of the earlier competitors thought like, oh, I don't want to do speed climbing because it's a sellout or it's just weirdo for the crowd or whatever. And I'm like, I don't care. You're going to give me a free rope. I'll do it, or I get money for it. I'll do it. And of course, when you went to Europe, it was really embraced. The culture loved it, especially Eastern Bloc climbers. And, one of my favorite stories is the first time I lost or I didn't win a speed climbing competition was the Arco Rock Masters. That was like the best of the best. And Jackie Godoff, who had never lost a comp, he won the Arco Rock Masters. I won 3 million lira for taking second place. And I was just like, wow, 3 million, back then it was before the euro dollar, and 3 million lira was like about $1,200 US. And I'm in Europe going like, shit, I could live here another 4 months on that. Like I was psyched,
wow.
Right? So just, it was almost like a pragmatic why. Why did I speed climb? Because it paid my expenses, and then I just was a kind of a natural thing to take it to Yosemite. I never earned a dime from getting the record on the nose. I mean, it's nice to be in a Real Rock film or a Masters of Stone film, but Eric Perlman doesn't pay you to be in your film. He gives you a pat on the back. And Real Rock, they like you, and they might buy you a sandwich, but you don't make money from being in a Real Rock film. So not back then anyway. I don't know about now. So it's just a matter of it's really fun.
Speaking of sandwiches, we had a question.
Snyder did the record on those and lots of other records that we don't get paid for. What about a sandwich?
We had a question. Someone said that you had awful food poisoning once before comp. Tell us about that at all. We had someone say that apparently you had really awful food poisoning once before a competition. Is there a story behind that at all?
Yeah, it was the second X Games. Yeah, the second X Games was also in Rhode Island. The first one was in Rhode Island. I won, and they wanted the returning champions to come, and I had just landed from India, like, I don't know, 4 days before the Rhode Island X Games. And I didn't get the food poisoning from being in India until I landed back in the US. I was just throwing up and heaving, and my flight to Rhode Island was leaving in I don't know, 48 hours. And I called whoever my contact was at X Games and said, I can't come. I'm throwing up. I'm sick, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing I know, Lynn Hill's calling me on the phone, like the next morning saying, Hans, you have to come. You know, you have to come. You're the defending champion. And I'm like, I can't even get out of bed. She goes, your flight's tomorrow morning. Just get on it and come here. They need you. It's great publicity. I'm like, oh, God. So back then, the rules were that you had to compete in speed and difficulty, or you were disqualified. And I remember that year, difficulty was before speed. And they're like, you have to get here, and isolation closes at such and such a time. And my plane landed like 40 minutes before isolation closed, and ESPN sent a film crew to the airport. And back then they didn't have security. You know, you could go to the gate and meet somebody. And so this film crew was at my gate, and they're like, go Hans. I'm like Joe Simpson running through the airport over luggage, just trying to get to this. You know, they had a black car waiting for me, and I jumped in the car, and you know, this is totally foreign to me because like I'm just some long-haired scrubbly climber, and here it is. A TV crew's following me through the airport, and I jump into this black car, and they get me to ISO like 3 minutes before it closes, and I was like the fourth to last person to go out on the route. I didn't make it to semifinals or anything, but I got up on the wall and I clipped the first couple draws and fell off. And then they had speed climbing later that day, and I ended up winning because I had gotten over my food poisoning by then. Yeah, that was a fun ride. Actually, I just did an interview 2 weeks ago about like, you know, did I ever envision myself being a professional climber or professional athlete? And I'm not a NASCAR fan, but the NASCAR guys are this good example. Drivers, they have like all these patches on their sleeves of, you know, Pennzoil and castor oil and just like 1,000 sponsors. And I always thought that'd be neat to be sponsored by all these companies and be a, you know, professional athlete. Whether you think a NASCAR driver is an athlete or not is irrelevant. It was just that image, right? And I remember at the X Games, I actually was one time with my Boreal jacket and like power bar and blue water ropes and, you know, Petzl, all these patches on my Boreal jacket. I'm like, God, I've made it. Here I am up on this stage being interviewed by somebody with TV cameras pointed at me, you know. Albeit it was like 15 seconds of fame. It was kind of fun. Like I made it as a real athlete or something.
That's great. What was was there something that like clicked in you from so you obviously have kind of a love of competition. Was there something that drove you like away from competition and like, you know, especially to El Cap? Like what drew you from climbing a 35-foot wall really fast to trying this route over and over and over, this huge wall?
Great question. And I want to be clear that I didn't get driven away from competition. I'm a pathetic old guy that didn't bow out gracefully. Like I always think Lynn Hill was awesome. She won her last World Cup and then she quit competition, right? Like such a clean exit, right? Not me. I'd go and like place 4th and 5th and 10th and 30th and last in the field. And I remember I was in isolation with Sasha Degulian, I don't know, like in 2012, and she's like 14 years old or something, and I'm in there, I'm 47 years old. And I'm sure she was just like, what is this guy doing at the National Cup? So to be clear, I didn't go away from competition to do big wall climbing. I continued doing it. But here is like the picture is I won a speed event in Lyon, France on a Saturday. And Monday I'm at Buix or Calanques or some local cliff, Monday or Tuesday in the south of France. And somebody comes up to me who I don't know, says, hey, congratulations on the speed record. And, you know, just 3 days before I had beaten probably Rakhmatov or somebody from the Eastern Bloc country by like a half a second. And I'd say, you know, humbly, I'd say, hey, thanks, but, you know, I only won by half a second, you know, da-da-da. And they'd say, no, I'm not talking about you winning the World Cup 3 days ago. I'm talking about you have the speed record on the nose, man. So awesome. And of course, they'd have a French accent or something. And I'd be like, wow, here I am on the other side of the world. and being recognized for having the speed record at that time with Peter Croft on the nose. And it was just amazing to be recognized for something I was doing in like my backyard, right? And it sunk in with me that ability to open doors and to be accepted by people around the world because I had climbed the nose. And it just made me always feel like, hey, if it ever gets broken again, I'm going to give it a try. And sure enough, Dean Potter and Timmy O'Neill broke the record, 9 years later. And I felt like, hey, I'm going to go give it a try again.
So on that note, like during when you had that kind of the big, the back and forth with Dean with the speed record on the nose, from like 1990 to 1992, you shaved off like 4 hours. You pretty much halved your time. And I was curious, is that like how much of big wall speed climbing is physical versus technical? Is it like polishing up your technical, what you're bringing to the whatever, you're being more efficient? Like, is that more effective than just training hard, or kind of how have you seen that?
Well, definitely back then when we did it in 8 hours to 4 hours, it was what you thought couldn't be done. Once it's done, you're like, oh, okay, those guys did it. We can do it, I point to 1975 when John Long, Jim Bridwell, and Billy Westbay climbed the nose of El Cap in a single day, right? Once they had climbed this huge grade, super famous grade 6 in a day, for the decade after that, it was probably done in a day multiple times every year, right? And by the late 90s, somebody had done it down to 9 hours. And so just the knowledge that it can be done is the hugest part, right? When me and Steve did it in 8 hours, and then Peter and Dave did it in 6:40, an hour and 20 minutes faster than us. I thought that they were the immortal locals, that just no one will ever break that time, right? And many other people voiced that too. And just as a lark, really as a lark, I started the stopwatch with Andy Pouvel. I think he was 19 years old at the time, and we were just going to run up the nose to just see how we compared. And we were totally, really like astonished. Like we checked our watch 3 times, like there's no way we went faster than Peter and Dave. And somehow we did. We did it in like 6 hours and a couple minutes. Not near as big a chunk off as they took off us, but then they just went right on back and did it in under 5 hours. And the following year, Peter was at a slideshow that he was presenting, and I asked if he'd climb with me. And I didn't expect to get the record with him when I climbed with Peter. I just thought it'd be fun to go out, but like we just kind of synced, and we both just like to move over the rock quickly. And I point out that the pace that Peter Croft and I climbed the nose in 4 hours, if you watch that, it would be 100 times, emphasize 100 times slower than the guys that are, and the gals that are winning the Olympic World Cup speed, 50 meter, or not 50 meter, 15 meter wall, right? They're climbing 50 feet in 6 seconds. Me and Peter Croft were taking 10 minutes to climb 50 feet, right? So like, it's a lot different sort of thing. We're not like crazy feats. Even when Alex Honnold and Tommy did it in under 2 hours, they're not like feet slipping all over the place and going, super fast like the Olympic speed climbers. They're going 20 times slower. It's quite a different thing. And it's, but it's still just amazing to top out and look down and go, wow, look at all that terrain I covered today. It's an amazingly cool thing.
Yeah, that's gotta feel kind of magical. Has like this quarantine process, so it seems like you like moving quickly. Has this kind of slow nature of this whole quarantine affected you in any way? Like, are you driving with it pretty well?
I've been lucky, I guess. I was in Kentucky when the kind of closures started for everything. And I was supposed to be there for 9 days, and I just looked at the situation in California. It was all getting patched down, and I had 5 shows to go to in the next coming 3 weeks. And obviously no, public gatherings of anybody coming to see my show are going to happen. And I didn't have work in California. So I'm like, well, I might as well stay here. The Kentuckians were not the last state to close down, but they were pretty late. And we climbed until April 6th, and then they closed all the crags. And I was in a little house in the woods there, and it so happened a buddy of mine had a private cliff. So we put up some first ascents there and climbed his routes on his private cliff. And observed all the rules of social distancing and whatnot, and stayed in our pod of 6 people. So that was my first 44 days of the pandemic, isolation. And I was just super fortunate that I got to climb and hike around in the woods and do some simulcast things for touchdown climbing and stuff.
That's a real fortuitous spot to find yourself in this sort of a pandemic, having a private crag with some buddies to explore.
Yeah. And then I flew back to Yosemite, and I did house projects, probably what everyone else is doing. Laid some bricks, painted the deck, fixed all the light fixtures that are broken, all the sort of little things around the house. Did that for like 7 days up in Yosemite.
Yeah, I've been starting more projects than I'm finishing right now around the house, but that's still all good. Speaking of projects, do you have any things planned for 2020 or like next big moves you're trying to do here?
I started this thing called the Do Hard Things Challenge, DHTchallenge.com, plug. And I had done this for 9-10 years at the Diablo Rock Gym. We had a challenge list every year. You'd try to complete as many of these challenges as you could during the year. And there would be really easy things like hang from a pull-up bar for 20 seconds or do a push-up from your knees, just to kind of get people started. And then, of course, there'd be big things like hike Mount Diablo, which is a 11-mile round trip up 2,000 feet gain. Things local to our area. And then there'd maybe bike 50 miles in 2 days or something. So but we also did fun things like learn 5 people's new names that you never met before at the gym, and little social challenging things. Pick up trash around the gym, pick up a bag of trash in the local climbing area, donate 2 hours to a congressperson, things like that, But what really struck me is that the simplest things, I was trying to get climbers at the gym to take a yoga class, or yoga people to try a CrossFit class, try to get people out of their element just so they could try new things. And the simplest things, like one woman came up to me and said, I'm so psyched for that challenge list. I just got off the elliptical machine, which is, elliptical machines are everywhere. They're the most basic sort of thing. They're like a treadmill, but you're not pounding your knees. And she goes, it was so amazing. I went and burned 50 calories on the elliptical machine. I'm like, oh, cool. Why was that so amazing? And she goes, well, I've been a member here 5 years, and I've always been scared to try the machines. And I did, just because I wanted to tick that off my list on the challenge list. I'm like, and now I get on it every day. I love it so much, and just simple things like that. You're getting people to try something they otherwise wouldn't, right? And so I realized, like, to make it a success for me personally, because I'm really selfish, is like I invited everyone to like, hey, please give me ideas for the challenge list next year. And people would come up with things that I couldn't think of, read a book aloud to somebody or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that sounds hard. And I'm like, oh, it is hard, but you should do it because someone else came up with the idea, not you,
Yeah, that's sick. That's a great thing for people to do right now, where I think we're all kind of like grasping at straws to find ways to stay engaged. How do people engage with Do Hard Things? Just go to the website, dohardthings.com.
Yeah, and we're on all the social media challenge websites, but DHT Challenge. Someone already owned Do Hard Things Challenge. Own Do Hard Things. But I've known of that saying for a long time. It's, the genesis of it was this guy was trying to help kids that were having trouble at school. Is like, it's really hard to do your homework. It's really hard to study for a test, but it's even harder to show up for a test not studying for it, or it's even harder to go to school if you're embarrassed because you didn't do your homework. So do hard things, right? Kind of deal.
That's a good point. If I have kids, I'm going to use that one. That's a really good, I like the way you put that. We have a question from Instagram. Cole.ing is wondering what your favorite route on Mount Diablo is.
Well, that's embarrassing. People knew I climbed there, huh? The Amazing Face, I think, is my favorite. Yeah.
The Amazing Face. Nice.
Yeah, I believe it's old school 5'9" there, and so it's like 5'11", really.
What kind of rocks on Mount Diablo? What's the rock like?
Terrible. It's terrible rock. It's sandstone. You can kind of wiggle it with your fingernail and carve your name into it. It's pretty terrible. But you know, which brings me to a great point about climbing is that people will say that like, oh, I don't want to climb Choss, or climbing Choss is bad. But like someone said, you know what, Hans, climbing Choss isn't unfun. It's just different than climbing clean, perfect granite. It's just, you know, there's different challenges, right? So what if it's crumbling, breaking off and all that stuff? It's still just a different challenge. If you love climbing, it's just different, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's all kind of part of the journey. I was curious too earlier. So like, you know, over 100 ascents of El Cap, obviously. I would think the amount of time that you dedicate to climbing is pretty enormous. Has that like affected relationships in your life at all, or how do you kind of balance all that climbing with the rest of life?
You know, whether you're like I think a pro tennis player, or well, it doesn't have to be an athlete. It could be a musician. It could be somebody who's a scientist that's just kind of a little quirky, weird, and they love physics so much they're in the laboratory the whole time. I have missed good friends' weddings because the weather was good in Yosemite. And that's tough because do I have regret for that? And did that hurt my relationship with them? It so happened that particular person was a exceptional climber and a really good long-term climbing partner friend of mine. And I think back then he got it. Like, why would you go sit in a grass lawn when it's hot and you're wearing a collared shirt and having some champagne when you could be on El Cap climbing a big route, you know? I mean, I really wanted to celebrate their wedding, but I just like, I want to go climbing, you know? And I know people that are like that their first 1, 2, 3, maybe even 5 years of climbing, but that I'm pathetic. That was like my 12th or 14th year of climbing. I did that, you know, so I had really no excuse for being so lame at not attending their wedding, I guess. But on the, you know, other relationshipal things is that like, I went years right after college, like not having a girlfriend and not having sex, because it was just too much trouble to coordinate that stuff. And I like sex, it's great, but climbing just was more simple and gave me a physical and endorphin reward that was amazing, you know. And it's not that I didn't have women and men friends, I did, but I just would always choose climbing over organizing those tough relationship things, you know.
Did having kids like change any of that for you? Did you have to kind of make different plans, or?
It certainly had to change. I mean, I'm really strange nowadays is that I had a wonderful childhood with my parents, stayed married until my father died, and I never heard my parents raise their voice to each other. I never knew them to be annoyed with each other. That's really strange for nowadays. I think, you know, 75% of the people you talk to have step brothers, step sisters, step moms and dads, and, you know, have their parents have divorced. And so I just thought that the norm was you have kids, then you're going to be together with that person. You're going to provide a atomic family for them, you know? We made it, me and Jackie, for 17, 18 years, providing a family for our 2 kids. And then we thought it was better to get separated, so we did. And how did that change things? Well, I actually did my best climbing when I was working full time, being a dad and a husband, or a papa and a husband. And I think because my climbing time was so restricted, although not terribly, I mean, I had weekends, off and on weekends. You're going to do some of that with kids camping, but because my time was more precious, I would focus more on I'm going to do this project and that route or whatever, right? And I'd train for it before work in the morning or after work in the evening or whatever. And my trainings became more focused for the climbing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kind of, even when you're really busy, sometimes that helps you hyper focus on other things, be more busy on like every aspect in your life. I never brought it up before. How did you recover well from your fall a couple of years ago? Like, you feeling good?
I feel good. Are you gonna do fancy computer stuff and show pictures?
I don't know if I can pop it up, so I'm a little nervous about that because I feel like our connection's a bit spotty. But I know on your Instagram, there's one video in particular on your Instagram where I think you were hanging from the side of El Cap, like waiting for Yosar to come out. It's pretty wild.
So, those listeners, I was right here on El Cap 2 years ago, May 3rd, and I fell and I hit a ledge 15 feet below, approximately, and I broke my left leg and my right heel. I was with a partner, Abe Shreve, and he evacuated me down to a place where the Yosar search and rescue could haul me to the top. And he extracted himself, I guess, by rappelling to the ground all night long, getting there the next morning. And yeah, I was in a wheelchair for 2 months, crutches or I guess knee scooter for 2 months, and then crutches for like 3 months. And I since have overdone it that second year and went back on crutches 3 times now, because I went back and climbed El Cap one time, and the descent is what gets me. It really hurts my legs to descend. And then another time I was just hiking around Lover's Leap, and the riverbed rocks damaged all my equalizing muscles in my lower leg, and I was on crutches again for another month. So I'm, back and forth, kind of hitting these spots and going backwards and then getting strong again.
Do you have any advice? For anybody out there that might be like recovering from an injury right now? Like, what did you do to kind of keep your mind right and to kind of keep your body strong, even though you were limited in mobility?
Well, at the beginning, I threw everything at it, right? Like, okay, I'll take THC instead of opioids. I'll get off the drugs and I'll, do whatever, different pain things, different creams, anything someone sends me. I'll do electrostimulation therapy. I'll do deep tissue work on it. I'll grit the pain of the mobility work on it. I'll go to the therapist like they're telling me to twice a week, and send me salves, creams, CBD, whatever. So people would say like, well, did the CBD help? And I'll be like, I don't know. I healed, but I was doing 5 things, maybe 10. And I think, doctors in general, they're fixing people that are broken that aren't athletes. And we always do. And I say I'm talking to all these people listening. I could assume that a lot of you are active outdoor people. And we always outperform the healing of what the Joe average public does. Always. So, the docs, if you ask a doctor, when can I weight bear? They'll say, well, you can do weight bearing in 5 weeks, which means, for an athlete, that's 3 weeks, because you have it's not that you have a better tolerance to pain necessarily, you might, but you have a better inventory of what your body should feel like. You're more aware of your body. So you start weight bearing and it feels horrific. You just stop and you know to stop. But you weight bear and there's a certain pain that feels like just soreness or bruising. You're like, I think I could do some weight bearing on this and it's not going to set me back, And granted, I've been wrong. I've been set back and on crutches, but you know, this whole positive thinking is good, but like, just whether you have positive thinking or not, do everything you can. Like, you can't work out, you can't go running because your legs are broken, so do abs, right? Set some record for yourself for your abs or your push-ups or something that's not broken on you, right? I point out to people all the time that climbing requires the tip of your fingers to the tip of your toes, like all your muscles involved. And that is good and bad, because if one thing's messed up or broken on it, your performance is compromised. But the good news is, if one thing's messed up on it, you have the other 90% of stuff you can still work out while you're waiting for that to rehab. So I love it for that second part. I'm going to be on the positive part of it, right? Like, there's always something you can work out. I can do finger crunches even if my biceps broken or something, you know?
That's a really good point. Did you start the do hard things challenge? Was that before your injury or after your injury?
After. But I had been, like I said, I'd been doing the challenge list at Diablo Rock Gym for 10 years, or almost 10 years. And always kind of been following some sort of, what can I do next that's a challenge, you know? And since a lot of people, what's a lot? A number of people, certainly not the majority, but a number of people found out about the challenge list we did at Diablo Rock Gym, and they took it on and did. You didn't have to be a member of Touchstone or a member of Diablo Rock Gym to do this challenge list. There was one woman, Holly Webb, who lived in Yosemite. She won it, quote, won it. She completed more challenges than anybody that year, and she just visited the gym like 6 times during the year. She was able to do all the other stuff somewhere else. And we honored that. She actually joined as a member for the year just to do the challenge list, even though she only visited the gym, I think, 6 times. So that kind of enthusiasm, and everybody asked me, like, once I stepped down as manager of the gym, hey, could you do a challenge for all of us to do wherever we live? And I'm like, sure, sounds great. Give me some ideas. Because again, one of the successes is having contributions from others, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's rad. I think I'm gonna dig through it myself here on the website, because I need to do hard things right now. Oh, there it is. That's sick.
DHT challenge. This is a collector's edition sticker. It's poor graphics by me and Lisbeth, who started it. Or it's, you know, whatever. It's, I wouldn't call it graphics. It's just, we made a sticker so people have something.
So we're wrapping up here. I was wondering, were there any like mentors in your life that you really that led you into climbing or brought you to some other level of climbing?
Well, the number one person that sticks out without question is Steve Schneider. He, you know, he is the quintessential long, scraggly blonde hair dirtbag climber from Yosemite, and I really didn't know him, and I had never climbed with him when we walked to the base of El Cap and we climbed the nose in 8 hours and 5 minutes, which set the record. But everything before that about Steve was, he was one of the only Americans who was free climbing these big routes. Now we all think of like Tommy Caldwell as the American free climbing, but Steve, for that whole decade, even after I met him, had climbed more big wall routes than anyone else. And here's the, listen carefully, and he was one of 4 or 5 nationally certified course setters for sport climbing. So here he was, the most experienced American big wall climber, or one of the top 3 big wall climber, and he was setting routes at the national level for competitions, right? This was 1990. So he was kind of doing the whole spectrum. Granted, we didn't have bouldering then, otherwise he probably would have done that too. But for like this whole sort of thing of the spectrum of rock climbing, he was at the very top of everything. And I just was psyched. He kind of took me under his wing and said, look, we can climb all these other big walls. I mean, loads of stuff. You'd have to look at the silly archive records on speedclimb.com or elsewhere, like, oh, you know, Steve Schneider set the record on the fastest solo of the Salothe and the fastest solo of Lurking Fear and the fastest solo of Zodiac and all these things. Granted, there was all these other great players like Steve Gerberdine and Dave Bankston and Scott Stowe and all those other local big wall people, but Steve was doing that plus setting rocks, setting comps on artificial walls, which was a really wild combination, right?
Mm-hmm. Did you do you have any kind of resonating advice that you'd pass on to someone that wants to get into maybe, I don't know, just big walling or like speed big walling?
I've always, like me and Yuji had a mantra at the beginning of when we tried to set the speed record. It was like safety first, speed second, fun third, and maybe you could switch your priorities to safety first, fun second, speed third. We had speed second and fun third, but it was really rewarding to go fast and set the record. And why I kind of pause for emphasis and say safety first is because if you really love climbing, then you want to go again and again and again. And I can tell you right now that like safe climbing is funner than not climbing at all. So
I like that. That's good. That's good. Good advice for the kiddos out there too. That's a good one. Well, sweet. Hans, thank you so much. If you guys haven't checked out his books, recommend you probably go to your website, hansflorine.com, follow him on Instagram, also on Twitter. He's got his speed climbing book that is coming out in audiobook right now. On the Nose is also on audiobook, and you can purchase it in book form as well. Also, if you guys haven't donated to Access Fund, please do so. You can just search for Access Fund Donate. We also have links on our YouTube and Facebook page right now. Thank you to Tex Tubbs for hooking it up with tacos. And also thank you from Boulders. We appreciate everybody that comes and watches these. We are we're missing all of you in our gyms, but right now we're working hard to give you guys good content. And if you appreciate it, we have a tip jar also available on our Instagram page. We're selling some shirts too. Check those out. They're pretty awesome. And next week, you guys should join us too. Brendan Leonard from Semi Rad is coming here. It's going to be some funny, good, poignant essays and thoughts that'll resonate with adventurers and climbers like all y'all. Hans, thank you, brother. I appreciate the time so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Guys, get out there and do hard things.
Hell yeah. Take care, man. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in.